Is it weird to drink white milk? Who's going to be our first on-time listener of the week? And is the awkward handshake/hug a thing of the past? All that and more on this week's episode of the C3 Sit Down. What's up, everybody? Welcome to week 3 of the C3 Sit Down podcast. I am Joe Chafin. Alongside me is the pastor of Crescent Community Church and my older brother, Pastor Josh Chafin. Last week, Josh, you were able to get back into it after a couple of weeks off, and I kind of just wanted to dive into what does that time off look for you, as a pastor, and it's rare, I think, for you to have 2 weeks or 2 consecutive weeks without preaching. So you had those 2 weeks from Pastor Kelsey to your wife Amy for Mother's Day, back at it last week. How important do you feel those 2 weeks off from preaching and doing the Bible study and things like that are for a pastor, just mentally and spiritually?
Well, as with any profession, it's obviously important to find time to get away, to just sort of decompress and just allow yourself the time you need to refresh your mind, refresh your ideas, and physically, mentally, spiritually, the whole thing. So, yeah, time away is always good. It's necessary, and it allows me to come back with sort of a motivation and an excitement that maybe is hard to maintain over a long period of time when there isn't a break. And so coming back this last week here and preparing a series that we've titled Created for Significance, living a life that matters, living a life with purpose. I think that idea is we're going to really connect with people. I know it was really encouraging for me throughout the week as I was preparing that new series that we started last Sunday, and so I hope that it's that way for others. But to answer your question, yes, time away is great, and it makes me, at least for me, it makes me come back with a new sense of motivation and excitement to really make some things happen. So it's good.
Yeah, I know with time off from work, working at a school, we get the summers off and things, and it's always real nice. Like the first month is kind of just like, it's kind of just like a breath of fresh air, and you're doing things around the house, and you're like, man, I'm enjoying this free time. But then it comes to a point where you're kind of like, okay, like I'm ready to get back. I'm ready to get back kind of into that routine. Do you find yourself like itching, especially like on a 2-week break where you're like, okay, I'm ready to get back. I'm ready to start a new series, or was it kind of just like, okay, it's time?
Well, the week that Kelsey preached, that was really truly an actual week of vacation. The week that my wife preached, I was doing some prep work, and I was kind of already back in it. So though I wasn't in the pulpit for 2 weeks, really only one of those weeks were what I would consider a vacation where I wasn't doing anything. The second one was,
you were mentally kind of just removed for a week,
correct,
of just like catching your
and
breath.
then the second week with Amy, I was really helping her develop her message because it was her first sermon, and I was doing lots of stuff to prepare for this Created for Significance series that we've just started. So yeah.
Do you ever feel like rusty coming back off of 2 weeks? Do you feel like when when I hit the record button last week after being 2 weeks off, where you kind of like had to get yourself back in a groove a little bit, did it feel weird? Because like I said, there's not many Sundays in the calendar year that you're not preaching. I feel like,
the way we have it set up at our church, I preach 46 out of the 52 weeks a year. Some churches are less, some churches are more, actually. So the way that works out is I have 2 weeks of vacation where I'm off, and then 4 weeks throughout the course of a year, obviously once per quarter, where I take those weeks not as vacation, but as a chance to sort of get ahead and plan ahead. So I know that I'm not preparing a sermon for a week. It doesn't mean I have the week off, but I'm using that week of not having to prepare a sermon to catch up and try to get myself ahead. But yeah, when I'm off and the first time back in the pulpit, or in this case, the first time back in front of the camera, sure, you feel a little rusty, but it's kind of like riding a bike, I guess. I know it's a silly cliche, but you kind of just get back on and figure it out pretty quick.
As far as motivation that you've been finding in the Psalms, and that's kind of been away from the Bible study, away from what you're sharing on Sunday mornings, just kind of your personal walk here during these times. You said you've been able to find motivation in the Psalms. I've really enjoyed hearing the verses that have stuck out to you through the first 2 episodes, so I kind of want to go there again on what has stuck out to you. Are you still in the Psalms? How long do you plan on kind of staying there, and what verse do you have for us this week?
Still there. Don't have a timeline, so we'll just see how it goes. But Psalm 91 is what I've sort of been resting on this week, and it's actually the third word of the first verse that really sticks out to me. This is what the first verse of Psalm 91 says: "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." And I love that word, dwell. It's not a common word. I don't use that in my typical, vocabulary throughout the week. I don't.
To me, it's like a Bible word. I don't hear
you would
dwell
right
in many other areas.
But the author, I think, kind of expands on it in the second part. He says, "will rest," right? He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow. And I think that's pretty much what dwell means, to rest, to sort of, to put it in common today language, chill, right? It's like, what does it mean to chill in the shelter of the Most High, especially, in this context of coronavirus and safer at home orders and all these sorts of things? What does it mean to dwell? What does it mean to chill and just relax in the presence or in the shelter of the Most High? And I think that's something that, probably doesn't come naturally for a lot of people. I think we're prone to be anxious. I think we're prone to not want to stay in one place, to not want to rest, to not want to chill in the presence of the Most High. And so, to me, it was just encouraging to think of it maybe in a little bit of a different way, right? I need to chill in the shelter of the Most High. I need to rest in the shadow of the Almighty. It lets me know that it's not about me, and there's something bigger than me out there that I can rest in, that I can be in the shadow of. There's like protection there. There's covering there that I think is important for us.
Now, is there another definition of dwell? Because I guess my mind's going to obviously the definition that you said, but like you can use that word as like, don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on something. To me, that would be like, not like don't get hung up on something.
Don't overthink, that kind of thing.
Yeah, almost like a negative kind of tone to it. Is there a different definition, or is dwell, or is that meaning?
Well, I think in the sentence that you're saying, like don't dwell on something, means to stay there. Like if there's something negative in your life and someone were to say, yeah, you're dwelling on that too much, don't dwell on whatever negative.
I guess the definition stays the same depending on the context.
I think
just
so.
don't chill in that area of your life if it is a negative thing. I guess is where I hear the word more. Starting this week on this podcast, we're going to start doing an on-time listener. So if you are listening to this podcast currently, it's probably sometime Thursday afternoon-ish. So if you are listening, we are looking for the first person to comment on either the Facebook post, on YouTube, wherever you can find an outlet to comment on, and let us know what the motivational verse from Psalms that Pastor Josh read was. I'll give you one last hint. It is Psalm 91. But the first person to comment on that, we're going to go ahead and give you guys a shout out next week's episode. We're going to give you a chance to play in one of our top 3 for me segments as well. So first person that we see comment either on Facebook or YouTube, you're going to be the on-time listener of the week. At this point, Josh, we were talking about quotes earlier this week, and I wanted us to kind of come out and pick one of our favorite quotes. So what do you have for us as far as, something, it can be from the Bible, it can be from an actor in a movie, it can be from wherever, but just a short quote that you really enjoy or that stands out to you.
No idea where I heard this from. Yeah, unknown source, unknown author. It's a quote from when I was a teenager. I heard it somewhere, and it's literally stuck with me now 20 years. Learn from the mistakes of others because you'll never live long enough to make them all yourself. Learn from the mistakes of others because you'll never live long enough to make them all yourself. To me, it lets me know, or it reminds me that, listen, everybody makes mistakes, right? We all fail. We all fall flat and do things that we would consider to be a mistake. And if you're not willing to learn from others' mistakes, right? If you see someone doing something that isn't right, if you see someone going down a path that is damaging or hurtful, you don't have to go learn that firsthand. You can see that someone else going down this wrong path led to failure and to a big mistake, and if you can't learn from that, but instead have to go and experience it yourself, you're going to have a painful life. Learn from the mistakes of others because you'll never live long enough to make them all yourself.
That's good. That's interesting. And on a simple, funny level, your friend jumps off a cliff doesn't mean you have to jump off the cliff. That's not going to go well for him. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You touch a hot stove and I get burnt doesn't mean Josh has to then touch the stove to make sure he knows he's going to get burnt. Yeah, that's good. The one I decided to pick is actually from a Rocky movie. And it's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I think that's a good adage just kind of for life. Everybody's got their struggles. Everybody's got their difficulties, their things that they go through internally that nobody really knows about other than you and God. Everybody's got kind of those inside secrets, things you struggle with. And it's like, it's not really how hard you're going to be able to hit, but, how much can you handle and still wake up in the morning, still serve God, still move forward. It's obviously from a boxing movie, but I kind of apply it at times, to my faith in life, when things are snowballing and just kind of going out of control, and it's just like one negative thing after another. The biggest thing I relate it to is, when I was trying to get my wife Isa her visa to come to the United States, it was a long 13 months, and it was basically 90% of it was negative and frustrating and things. And sometimes I would just think about that, how much can I handle here and just keep moving forward? There were so many times where it was like, dude, I'm done. Like I give up, whatever happens. But it kind of helped motivate me through that time as well. So a couple of good quotes there. You and I have been really kind of getting after the Old Testament through the first two episodes of the C3 Sit Down. We have, kind of picked our own most impactful person. We have drafted our own teams of top players and top impactful people from the Old Testament. And we're going to kind of wrap up a little bit of the Old Testament journey that we've been on here in the Week 3 podcast, the third episode here. But we voted Noah the most impactful person of the Old Testament for many reasons. We then went and drafted our teams. And remind me real quick of your team. You had Noah as your first pick, and then I believe you had Methuselah and Nehemiah, I think, on your team. And then I went Abraham, Samson, and Isaiah. Again, obviously lighthearted. Everybody's impactful in the Old Testament. If you get your name in the Bible, that's pretty cool. But just some stats here. I kind of wanted to get some number stats and things about the Old Testament. So obviously there's 39 books. Do you know how many chapters are in the Old Testament? 929, and there's only like 1,800 and something in the entire Bible. So 929 in the Old Testament, 23,114 verses in the Old Testament, and 2,278,100 letters in the Old Testament. Here's one that I really enjoyed, and I'm taking this on the speed, I guess, of an average reader, but it takes 52 hours and 20 minutes to read the Old Testament. Think about how long that is. 52 hours and 20 minutes to read the entire Old Testament at what I'm guessing is an average speed. And then I saw 168,000 Bibles. This is kind of a side note, but another fun stat. 168,000 Bibles are distributed in the United States a day. 168,000 Bibles are distributed in some way in our country every day. I mean, to me, that's astonishing. That's hard for me to wrap my mind around. Crazy. People are getting Bibles, not necessarily 168,000 people, but just that many prints of the greatest story ever told, just going out every single day in the United States. So that.
I'll add a quick fun fact to you. We said there was 39 books in the Old Testament. The easy way to remember, if you can remember that number, you can know how many are in the New and how many are in the entire Bible. Because there's 39 in the Old, you take 3 times 9, gives you 27. That's how many's in the New. Add those two together, 66.
39 and 27 is 66.
There you go.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yep. Little fun fact.
Golf clap for whoever came up with that and figured that out. That's impressive.
God, so
yeah,
he put it together.
Okay, sure, yeah. I'm sure God was like, you know what, 3 times 9 is 27, and you add them together, and that'll give you how many total. I'm sure he was thinking of that. Moving on to the news segment. This is going to be something that we are going to do our best to work into every single episode of this podcast, no matter how long it lasts. as long as we're doing this, this is going to be a segment in every single episode. It's going to be called the top 3 for me. Last week, we had a heavy and detailed debate about cereal that I thoroughly enjoyed. And actually, my birthday was this past Sunday, and my mom clearly listened to the podcast because she got me all 3 of my top 3 favorite cereals for my birthday. So I have been pounding cereal this week. It's been great. But the top 3 for me, this is going to be something, we're either going to do a top 3 favorite, a least favorite, a draft style, whatever it is, it's going to be, the number 3 is going to be included in some way. It's going to be 3 of something. And it's going to be a wide array of things and opportunities really for us to dive into for this. But like we said, we've drafted our top 3 players from the Old Testament. We have debated our top 3 favorite cereals. And for today, we are going to go ahead and switch from food to beverage. And we are going to discuss our top 3 favorite beverages. So I'll go ahead and let you start, Josh, with your number 1. It doesn't have to be pop. It doesn't have to be anything specific, just beverage. No, don't say water. We know we need that to survive. That's boring. So water is eliminated. But your top 3, or first at least, favorite
can we
beverage.
start from the bottom, because then it builds excitement for what number 1 is, right?
Sure.
So let's
So
start
your
at
number
3.
3.
Yeah. So number 3 for me is going to be, I'm going to go with any kind of sweet tea.
Are you kidding me?
I love sweet tea.
Okay,
especially McDonald's.
We
McDonald's
really
sweet
got
tea.
We really got to go over this before we start recording, because number 3 for me is sweet tea, no lemon.
There you go. Sweet
Really?
tea's good.
How did we pick the same third option?
Well, maybe we'll pick the next.
Dude, you
second
better
one.
not have my other 2, or that's gonna tick me off. Yeah, we really need to discuss this. I never thought you would have put down sweet tea. I never see you drink sweet tea.
I love sweet tea from McDonald's. Like, McDonald's sweet tea is the best. I just had sweet tea here at this house last week when we were celebrating your birthday. That's what I drank.
We had sweet tea?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize we had sweet tea.
Yep.
It was my own birthday. I missed out on the sweet tea. I remember it as a kid, my Uncle Bill making it in those huge pitchers and pouring the sugar in and being really hot in the summer and just pounding sweet tea. So that, I guess that's boring. You got my number 3 choice for sweet tea. So how about number 2? Should I even let you go on this
All
one?
right. 2 and 1 are debatable for me, but I'm going to go with my number 2 as coffee.
Wow, coffee. Now, is that, obviously you're not going on taste. You're going on the effect.
No, I love
The taste of coffee?
The taste of coffee, yeah.
Not just because you're getting caffeine and energy and you really need it in the morning. You're going on just taste.
I actually don't even really think of it as giving me energy. I mean, if I wanted energy, I would drink an energy drink. I just enjoy.
Dude, you're getting energy from coffee. It's loaded with caffeine.
Maybe to a certain extent, but
Do you drink it every day?
no,
No.
4 or 5 times a week. So
So a decent amount.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't know if you're getting energy or not, because it's natural for you.
yeah, no, I
don't drink
I just
coffee
enjoy
enough,
the
but-
taste of coffee. I thoroughly enjoy coffee.
Do you go cream? Do you go sugar? Do you go black?
Absolutely no sugar. Yes, cream.
So just cream, but no sugar.
Yep.
I kind of went. My dad drinks it black and a lot, and I was kind of lazy a lot in the morning when I used to work at UPS years ago, and I just would get up and pour it in and not put anything in it. And I actually kind of like it just black. I mean, I like it with sugar or with cream in it, but I kind of just drink my coffee black too. It's weird. Not a lot of people just drink it straight like that, but yeah, coffee definitely not in my top 3, but that's debatable for number 2. Number 2 for me, I went pop, and I went Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
It's not a pop I drink a lot. It's not a pop that's super popular, I guess. As far as at restaurants and things like that, I don't know. People just, I think, naturally get Coke or Pepsi or whatever's there. But as far as dark pop, Dr. Pepper is my absolute favorite. I don't drink it that much. But as I was making this list, I was kind of trying to think in my head, something that if somebody said, this is the 3 things you can drink for the rest of your life, I couldn't think of a life without Dr. Pepper, so that comes in at number 2 for me.
That would be an honorable mention for me. Love DP. And if you think about it, like you just said, something you couldn't go without. Got to have the sweet tea, got to have the coffee, and my number 1 without question is Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew, really?
Got to have Mountain Dew.
I have not had Mountain Dew in a while. It is incredible. I would say it's honorable mention for me. I guess I realized how much sugar and stuff was in it, and for some reason in my mind, even though it makes no sense, and I'll admit it, but somehow in my mind I feel like other pops are healthier than Mountain Dew. I don't know why. I think Mountain Dew, and I just think that's a really unhealthy pop. Yeah. But as far as taste, it's it's incredible. I was not thinking you would say that. Number one for me, again, my criteria on this was I have 3 things I can drink the rest of my life, and I could not imagine the rest of my life without milk. Wow. I have to have milk, and some people are like, dude, some people think that's like it's like bizarre to just drink milk, white milk. Like there's people out there sometimes I see on Facebook, like if you drink white milk, you're nuts or whatever. It's like I enjoy drinking milk. I mean, at night I pour myself a cup of milk. I would say 4 to 5 times a week at least, and I just drink a glass of milk. I don't really need to eat anything with it to enjoy it. I put milk / Hartzler's Dairy's chocolate milk, which I get probably twice a year, but when I do, it's just unbelievably good. But there's no way I could live the remainder of my life without having milk. It has to be one of my options for a beverage.
Yeah, I honestly can't believe that I allowed myself to not consider milk because I had a glass of it last night with dinner. I mean, I drink milk consistently. We go through a couple gallons a week at our house, and yeah, that was a big mistake. But
I imagine now that you and I are adults, obviously, like how much milk did mom and dad have to buy?
Oh, it was more than 2 gallons a week.
When like you were home from college and I was like in high school, like when my metabolism was through the roof and I could just eat like 10 hamburgers and not gain a pound. Like I drank so much milk, and so did you. I mean, they probably...
Well, it wasn't uncommon. If you remember back in the day, Dairy Mart, which is now Circle K, but Dairy Mart in Creston always had 2 for $5. 2 gallons of milk for $5. Yeah. 2 for $5. And there was definitely weeks where that purchase was made twice. That we were going through 3 to 4 gallons.
If you add in my cereal and my just drinking milk, you and I probably put a big dent in mom and dad's pocketbook buying milk. So yeah, so I had milk, Dr. Pepper, and sweet tea. You had sweet tea, Mountain Dew, and coffee. Interesting. All right, moving on now to kind of a fun topic here, but also getting back in towards church. Some cliches, some church moments that we've had over the years, either you or myself, or just funny things that kind of happen at church. When I thought of a church cliche or a Christian cliche, if you will, the very first thing that came to my mind, and it bothers me when I see it, and I don't know if I should let it bother me, but I admit that it does, and I can also admit that I've done it myself. But it is when I see on Facebook or wherever else, whatever other platform you can think of, but I see thoughts and prayers or I'll pray for you. I feel like, and Lord forgive me if I'm wrong, but there's got to be at least a pretty big chunk of people that write that are not actually praying. They might be thinking of us in the moment, so I'll give them like 50% of the thoughts part, but are they actually taking the time to pray? And is that just kind of a Christian cliche / cop-out when somebody's going through something difficult? And I've done it myself. I've told somebody I'll pray for you and not done that. And I was really convicted of it a few years ago, and I'm like super anti-thoughts and prayers. I don't write it, and if I do, or I let somebody know I'm praying for them, I do it right then in that moment so that it's like off my back and I can't feel guilty about it. But how often do you see that, and do you wonder, like, you get 50 comments on, my dog died, and you get 50 comments, thoughts and prayers. It's like those 50 people are not praying for you.
Yeah, and like the newest thing too now is the emojis on your text messages or your Facebook, whatever, the praying hands. Yeah. It's like you see something terrible and you throw up a few praying hand emojis, and it's like you've done your good deed for the day. No, I mean, I think, we should give people the benefit of the doubt, but I think the reality is you can take a reflection of your own life, and chances are likely because you've done it, right, meaning you've thrown up the prayer emojis, or you've said, I'm going to pray for you, and then not done it. Chances are likely that if that's been your experience, then it's been the experience for other people. And so it's not like, this isn't a chance to harp on people or make people feel bad about having done that in the past, because I think we've all probably done it. It's something that we've all done.
And I think there's a decent amount of people out there that they do.
Sure.
They do pray for you. It's just that phrase for some reason, just like when I see that, it's just like, man, come on, like, please, Lord, tell me these people are actually praying and not just like using that as a lazy Christian thing. Like, hey, I'll pray for you. I'll be praying for you. Thoughts and like, man, I hope, for that person's sake that they're not just saying that. I know I've done it, but that's kind of one of the cliches that stick out to me right out of the gate. Another, moving on, I guess, to moments. This is kind of a funny story for me. A couple of years ago, you gave me the opportunity to preach. It was the first time I ever preached in my life, and I wasn't really nervous. I've broadcasted football games for like 9 seasons now. So public speaking or knowing that there's people listening to me, whatever, doesn't necessarily make me nervous. So I wasn't nervous in that way. But the first sermon I had, I don't think it was possible, and I don't think I've had it this bad since, but my mouth was so dry. Like, I had the driest mouth in the entire world preaching that first sermon. And I just remember thinking as I was going through my notes, like, I can't wait to get to scripture, because when I get to scripture, I know people are going to have to pause to get their Bibles out or look at the screen, and I can get a swig of this water. And I took the smallest swig ever because I didn't want to sit there and gulp it down and like not have any left. And I swear to you, it was like, I would be 2 seconds in after that gulp of water and I was back to square one. Like, my lips were sticking together and it was miserable. And I kept thinking in my head, I don't feel nervous, but apparently my brain is sending something because my mouth is super dry. But it was torture for a while heading through that sermon with a dry mouth, big time.
Sure. Yeah. I was trying to think if there was anything like that for me. It's been such a long time now since I had like my first sermon. The thing that comes to my mind is actually a speaking engagement, I guess, that I had and so this doesn't quite fit in your question, but it just popped into my head. Not when I was not preaching at the church, but I was asked to do the opening prayer for a new school year at Norway, and they call it the convocation, whatever. All the faculty are together before the school year starts, and they bring in a pastor to just say a few things and pray for the school year. And I was asked to do that. I don't remember what year it was, 2015 or so. And for some reason, at that point I had somewhat been preaching for a little bit of time, but I was so nervous that the entire time I was standing up there, my right leg was shaking uncontrollably. And I don't think anybody in the audience would have been able to tell because I was far enough away, but the superintendent and the school board was directly behind me in chairs. And so my entire time up there speaking and praying, I'm like, literally, I'm saying what I'm supposed to be saying, but at the same time, I'm giving an equal amount of thought to everybody behind me. The superintendent and the whole school board has to see my leg shaking, and they must think that I'm a complete joke. Like, they're probably second guessing, even
like
asking
you're totally
me to do this.
Crumbling.
I'm crumbling. It was.
Were you behind you were behind the podium, right?
So
the audience couldn't see.
I believe the audience
shaking.
would have been able to see my leg shaking, but the superintendent and the whole school board and the chairs behind me and the principals that was on stage definitely saw it. Yeah,
that is hilarious. I didn't know that. And then the other thing that I thought is kind of a funny thing. There's lots of funny memes. We might get into those in next week's episode. But something that happens to me, I would say about once a month at church, is the awkward handshake/hug.
Okay.
And it happens to me all the time. It's like, there's certain people I'm like, I know 100% they're going to give me a hug, no question. And then there's other people where it's like, are we at the hug level yet? Mm-hmm. Or are we still handshake? And there's times I'll go in for a handshake, they got their arms out, and it's like the tips of my fingers almost poke their belly, and then I'm like, oh, I got to like backtrack and get the arms out. And then there's times where I'm almost positive, oh, this person's going to give me a hug. I go for the hug, and then their hand's sticking out, and I have to backtrack like, oh boy, I don't know whether I'm supposed to shake your hand or give you a hug. Yep. But that happens to me about once a month, and it always cracks me up. And it made me think, what is church going to look like when we return? I mean, I imagine, things are kind of starting to open up, and we're kind of getting through the nastiest part of this wave of this whole virus thing. I mean, eventually we're going to be coming back to church soon. What is that going to look like? Are we going to be doing air high fives, air hugs? Like, what is it going to look like eventually when we all get back together? Because everybody's going to be so excited to see each other, and it's going to be like, I know there's certain people I haven't seen in a while. I'm going to want to go up and shake their hand, but it's like, I can't. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be that guy. So it's just like, what is church going to look like when we do return?
I think there's probably two ways to answer that question. What it's going to look like when we first come back. And then the second part of that question is, okay, are we ever going to get back to the way it was?
Right.
So
Two different questions. You're right.
Yeah. Like when we first come back, whenever that is, and we're, hopeful that it's going to be, sooner rather than later in the next, month or month and a half, we're hoping to be back to meeting again. And then when that happens, I mean, yeah, we're not going to have meet and greet. Right. I mean, I can't foresee a scenario where we are going to be condoning the shaking of hands and the people being that close together. It's just we're in a time now where it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And so
the thing you don't want to be is the church that just starts back up and pretends nothing's wrong, and then somebody gets sick or something. So it's like you almost you have to like more caution the better out of the gate,
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, meet and greet, how is that going to go?
Yeah. And to specifically answer your question, I mean, there are certain guidelines that the state of Ohio has put out. There are guidelines that Church of God Ministries in Ohio has put out, and they're just that. They're guidelines. And so every church has to make decisions, number one, on when to come back, and every church has to make decisions on when you do come back, what's that going to look like? What is the experience, going to be? And so, the leadership team and myself are reviewing all those guidelines, and we're meeting in a few weeks to, kind of hopefully at that point
make our own specific decision
exactly on what it's going to look like. But yeah, just to think about the hugging or handshaking. It's like, that's not going to be a reality for at least when we first come back, because that's just not what we as human beings are doing right now. We're not shaking hands. We're not hugging unless it's your family.
Right.
So
is there anything that the state put out that is like not necessarily like a rule or a law but is there anything that they're like pretty strict about, like definitely know this or definitely need to do this, or they just like, here's our suggestions?
Well, they're all guidelines. They're all suggestions for the most part. And I've tried my best to keep up, but it's like there's constantly new orders coming out. So, I don't want to speak too concretely because, like I said, I'm not super up to date. But we're probably not going to have kids ministry. People are going to stay together. Families are going to stay together. You're probably not going to do like donuts and coffee and those sorts of things because, serving that kind of stuff and, possibly contaminating it and those sorts of things. So, probably no cafe when we first come back, I'm guessing. Probably no kids ministry, and the social distancing thing. You at this point, you still need to be socially distant. And so how do you do that in a sanctuary? How do you do that in the worship center? Well, you space the chairs out 6 feet and see how many people you can fit in with being socially distant.
And the thing too is like, I feel like people are going to be understanding of this. Like, I mean, we are not the only church doing this. Of course, every church in the country essentially is having these discussions and making these decisions and things. And like I said, you don't want to be the church that just doesn't follow any guidelines.
Sure.
So, there's a fine line, and it's like, to think about, the kids ministry or the no cafe in the morning. Things are going to be different, but at the same time, I think it's important for all of us just kind of take a step back and be like, okay, thank God we're at the point where we're going to be attempting to get back together and to physically see, other believers and worship together and things like that. So, it's on one hand, there's parts that might be a little bit disappointing, but on the other hand, it's like, at least we're here. You have to start here, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get back to as close to what it was before. But you're right, and we have plenty of hand sanitizing, dispensers all over the church that have been there well before this ever happened, that definitely are going to be getting used, I imagine, even more so now. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that are different, but overall, it's an exciting time to know that we're having these discussions. A month ago, it was like we weren't even thinking about it, and now it's like, we're turning the corner here a little bit and starting to have these discussions about what church is going to look like when we all get back together. So the storm is hopefully close to coming to an end of where we can get back together and worship together. So again, motivation from the Psalms. If you heard that, hopefully you can send us a comment on Facebook and or YouTube with that for a shout out next week. Milk, Dr. Pepper, sweet tea, big time for me. Mountain Dew and sweet tea and coffee for Pastor Josh. Also, the awkward handshake or hug at church, at least, is going to be off my table for a little bit, so I won't have to get weird with any of you. It's going to be accepted to just air high five from now on. I think that'll about wrap it up here, Josh. Any final thoughts on week 3's episode here of the podcast?
I want to thank everybody that's tuning in each week. Hopefully you're finding it enjoyable, a little bit of a break from the mundane stay-at-home life that you're experiencing. So we hope that you are finding inspiration and some enjoyment, and we want to thank everybody that's tuning in.
Well, that'll wrap it up for week 3's episode of the C3 Sit Down. Make sure to tune in next week where Josh and I move into the New Testament, pick our new top 3 for me category, and our first on-time listener of the week shout-out. All that and more on episode 4 of the C3 Sit Down. And remember, it's not weird to drink milk.